what I've really learned is that failure is such an invaluable part of the creative process that if you're not truly embracing and kind of following the cues that failure gives you, because there's so much information in a failure, if you really look, that to me, it's a real, it's a place where you could really mine for gold.
Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narrative, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan, and it's nice to see you all.
Before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, check out our YouTube channel and this episode's notes, as well as narrative.com/podcast, because that's where you can find all of our previous episodes. So very excited because today our guest is CM Conway. CM Conway is a filmmaker, marketing and storytelling consultant and coach. Her diverse, inspiring film, How to Successfully Fail in Hollywood, became the little indie that could and is now available in a top streaming giant. The witty and poignant movie is inspired by her story, and it follows Ellie and her gay Latinx best friend Ben, flipping failure in outrageous Tinseltown, while revealing a treasure trove of its inner secrets. Her book of the same name is in the works. The film's podcast is on Apple, iTunes, and other popular platforms, and invites and shares the slip-up stories of artists and insights gained. Miss Conway has been featured in numerous media outlets, and is dedicated to uplifting the stories of minorities while unearthing unique stories of women, marginalized cultures, and communities. Really excited to have you on the show, CM. Thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's just a pleasure to be here and talk and have a conversation about stories, my favorite topic.
Yes, stories and failure, which is one of the things that comes up a lot on our podcast, as well as we talk about leadership. So excited to have this kind of unique lens, no pun intended, because it's in the film world. But I'm very curious about how, if you could tell us a little bit about what led to make this movie, How to Successfully Fail in Hollywood. Why that focus?
Well, it evolved over time, but I was in LA for over a decade. I live here back in my roots in the North Bay, California. So like many actors in Hollywood, I was just working every day, hitting that bat and trying to basically contribute to the landscape of cinema. And about over a decade, I was also building my business. We provide storytelling programs. I was a consultant. And just I have a performance arts background. And so it was a really exciting, but very, very challenging time. And when I moved out of LA back to the North Bay here, I couldn't get it out of my head. I can't explain it, but it haunted me that I really didn't accomplish what I really felt I went there to do. A lot of actors, it's just the odds are stacked very high against you. And it wasn't for not of trying. I certainly, produced my own projects, was auditioning, got agents, just really a kind of a very common story, really. But when I got back, I just felt like, God, what was all that for? I mean, yes, I had some successes. Yes, I was in smaller projects. Yes, I produced this and that, but I really didn't contribute to the landscape of cinema like I really, really wanted to. So it haunted me so much so that I started writing about it because I had to get it out of my head. It was just very cathartic. So that turned into a book. And then I really wanted to just try my hand at screenplay writing. And so I started writing the screenplay. And then this really funny thing happened. And that is, I started really seeing the humor of all my experiences. And I felt this shame when I came back, to my hometown here, actually, in the North Bay, as beautiful as it is, and the quality of life is exceptional, I felt this shame that I believe a lot of actors do, um, artists do, when you feel like, God, I just, didn't get that brass ring. And so I started seeing the humor in all these experiences, and in sharing them, finding out so many other artists have the same experience. And then once I found the lens of humor and really just went into the failure, didn't avoid it, didn't kind of go into my shame about it, I found it really funny. And then I really started to just dig and go right in there. And when I would talk about it, I would just see like this light go on, and people like, I've had that same experience, not in acting, but in this, way. Or an actor would say, I can't tell you how much you're mimicking this experience that I'm having. So failure is a very common experience we all have. And I thought, instead of having shame about it, let me go right in there.
Mm.
So I love that, because when we discovered each other, when you sent me an email and I looked at your work, I remember thinking this could come in handy for us in the work we're doing, because failure is not always talked about, or we repurpose, or we couch it. And I love the fact that you owned it and you declared it and you repurpose. It's never an easy road. I'm not saying it was all that, but I just think once you own your voice, it really took on a new purpose for you. So I think that's amazing and great, and it just parallels a lot of things I've been thinking about. So fair play.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. As well as, by the way, this opportunity just to be here and talk about it, because I do think failure is something that maybe it's being talked about a little bit more. But overall, I think, especially like in Hollywood, they want the opening weekend to do really, really well. No one wants to talk if it doesn't do well. And I just thought, well, what if we really talk about it? What if that really connects us to our humanity, which it does? What if we all have this very common experience that we're not actually sharing, or that we're ashamed of? And then it's really kind of opened up this dialogue that led to our podcast, where artists are sharing their slip up stories and what they gained. Because what I've really learned is that failure is such an invaluable part of the creative process, that if you're not truly embracing and kind of following the cues that failure gives you, because there's so much information in a failure, if you really look, that to me, it's a real, it's a place where you could really mine for gold.
Yeah. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that. What is there to learn from failure, and what you particularly learned?
So what I learned, first of all, is how to find the funny, So when you really start, now that worked for me, depending on the failure, it's sometimes someone may need to find the funny, or find, or basically mine the gold. And so what I learned is that failure has so much information if you only look. So often failure will tell you maybe when to turn the sail on your boat. It might tell you when to kind of stop and, kind of tread in the water. So if I'm using maybe like a sailboat analogy, turn the sail, or maybe you kind of want to ride the wave a little bit. Maybe you want to stay still. Maybe you want to kind of avoid a shipwreck. So you kind of, instead of, once you get past the emotional reaction, what is this failure telling me? Is it telling me to stop? Is it telling me to persevere? Basically, is it not the right time? Or do I need to dig a little deeper? And do I need to maybe find another way? Do I need to find another day? Do I need to find another avenue? So it really is a fine teacher of honing your intuition. And that's what failure teaches us, because it's really up to the person and the experience to find out what is this really telling me or teaching me, and then you really start using your own intuition to really kind of gather that information. Sometimes talking about it helps, writing about it helps, doing a creative project about it might help. But I would say communication, dialogue, or some way of utilizing the failure that feels productive will give you a lot of information.
Now, do you have, since you're a visual person in language and on film, do you have a picture that you'd like us to showcase that would bring that example to life and lock it into our learning and memory?
Let's see. Well, there is this picture of there is a picture, a behind the scenes picture of us, where there's a green screen in the back, and there's a car in the middle of a studio. And that was just that was a really fun day, but it was the opening of the film. And that scene depicted someone being booted off the set, which was the protagonist, which is portrayed by myself. And let's just say I did my share of background work early on back in the day in Hollywood. And I kind of like melded these experiences that I had about being a background artist, and then also the sort of experience of failing in Hollywood kind of in that scene. And so it does take some artistic license, but basically she ruins, yeah, there it is. And so this is a behind the scenes picture, and we had to drive. My husband Eduardo Cuevas is on the left, at least my left, depending on however someone's seeing it. He was helping that day, whenever he could in the film, he'd help. Lisa Stoll is in the foreground. She's framing the shot. That's Ryan Williams as the cop, and then Janet Desea she plays Fiona Orlando, who's a lead actress in the film, kind of the vision of what the protagonist, Ellie, wants to be. And so Ellie is actually in a very funny pink seahorse outfit. And you have to see the film to see the outfit, but it is on the one of the posters of the films. We're on, I mentioned a top streaming giant right now. And so you just go to funnyfailurefilm.com. It has the link to the movie. But right after this scene, and again, it's just a close-up of Janet. There's a wonderful road kind of going behind her when you see it in the film. And then I ruin the take because I'm off to the side because I'm making sounds and I'm chewing on peanuts, and it's echoing throughout the studio. And suddenly she just breaks character and starts screaming. And then right then, boom, we see that this is a set. So the movie opens where you think, oh, it's just a woman driving down a country road and having a wonderful time. And then you hear these crunching peanut sounds, and then she just loses it. And so to me, it was just sort of this great depiction to open the film where you think it's a woman driving, and then suddenly you see it's a set. Now, that might have been an obvious choice about a movie about Hollywood, starting the opening scene on a set, but it's sort of like, boom, the bubbles just burst. And now suddenly you see the reality, the dream, and then the reality. And the film often plays with those two themes. What is real? What isn't real? Who's being authentic? Who's just performing a role? And so the lead characters are constantly navigating truth, fantasy, and identity throughout the film.
And what I think about the thing about giving the film away, it also challenges, like, there's the big fail of what you think the Hollywood, well, you use that phrase, this is not a Hollywood ending, and a lot of things, but also awareness, the characters has a choice of failing themselves or failing what they think, society's telling them to do in these opportunities. What's going to be the big real failure overall. So I'm hoping we're giving everybody a little sound bites to intrigue them, to get them curious to watch this. But I think it's lessons we can all learn. What can I do to look back, to look forward? Tweak it, raise the bar, and just move on. And I think the power of humor sometimes to laugh about it, because when we're laughing about it, we can make some peace with the situation. And you're right, you humanized it, and you gave a space to people to share as well, and do some learning and saying it's okay, you're going to repurpose this.
Yeah,
thank you.
You mentioned, CM, the finding the funny, was one of the ways that we can kind of move forward after failure, and start to look at what is there to learn. And you also mentioned this word shame, right? That a lot of people feel that, and especially in the context we're talking about with Hollywood. But that struck a chord with me, because it feels like when one fails, or there's the perception of failure, there is that sort of shame that kind of prevents a lot of people from actually getting to the learning phase, right? And I wonder if you have any thoughts or reflections about how to move from that kind of place of like, oh my God, I'm feeling miserable because I failed miserably here and this was my dream or whatever, and I feel so much shame and I don't want to talk to anybody about it, to then, this 180 or perceived 180 of like, wow, now I want to talk about my failure. Or I've learned about it. What's your experience in kind of moving from that particular space to this other space, which seem really different?
That is a wonderful question. I believe it's a true process that you have to embrace. Now, it takes practice like anything, as any athlete will tell you, as any actor or artist will tell you. Whatever they're doing, whatever craft that they are, skill that they are developing, it takes practice. So this, like any other skill, takes practice. So initially, it might feel so uncomfortable to go into that. Well, go into it, right? That would be my first um, tip. Go into it. Just start feeling those feelings. What does that feel like? Go into the shame. Allow yourself to have those feelings of what the experience was for you. That has a lot of value to it, as well as valuable insights. So I believe, first of all, just really embracing the experience you're having around it, not avoiding it, not trying to brush it under the rug, which is kind of a real often knee-jerk reaction we have, but really trying to just go into the experience, allowing yourself to feel it, write about it, talk about it to whomever you trust, and start there. And then let's see where that leads. Because I believe that once we just take that small step, because I really do believe that, and yeah, I mean, I've heard this before. I think even your narrative, the narrative book that your co-founder of Narrative had written mentioned something about a small change can actually make a big result. And so I think we can never underestimate the power of a small shift, and just a simple thing like embracing exactly how you feel about an experience, starting right where you are, and then kind of letting the stones, the path, kind of reveal itself from there. But I think that's really the starting point. And then that might then create another sense of, once you allowed that to have its way, that might then reveal another step.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And rewriting the script we tell ourselves too is helpful. I love the fact that the thing we're using today is your character, and it's amazing because here's this person who has dance background, acting background, voice background, musical background, all these things, and things aren't always clicking or things are going wrong. And I think it's such an interesting parallel because we're now in a market economy where people are getting notified that they've lost their jobs and things are restructured, and they have amazing gifts. When I work with clients, they're talented, they have all these amazing things, but now they need to repurpose and say, what is the thing that's going to help me land, and look at it. So clearing our vision and sight about what we think is supposed to happen sometimes, and looking at where the opportunities are, is such an important step. And you show it, the resilience of, showing up in these costumes, showing up in these scenes every day. And it's amazing. Yeah. And this is such a joyful shot.
So by the way, that's Adrian Gilbert. He's authentically represents, wonderfully, beautifully represents this character. And he and I, just had a lot of fun making this film, and he's just a real positive depiction of the Latinx gay community. To me, it was also very important to have diversity, equity, and inclusion in the film. Very positive, sort of non-stereotypical of the Latinx gay community. I grew up around the gay community. I have dear friends near and dear to me, people near and dear to me that are a part of that community. And so that was kind of another aspect of the film, that it's just a lovely friendship between these two characters and how they keep each other going. Because that is another aspect of, when we feel shame or failure, being able to really kind of reach out to those that we love and trust, whether they are our adopted family, whether they're our real family, our friends, and so forth, our community, because failure is a common experience. And I think if we just connect to one another. We realize sort of how similar we all are than different. But I love that analogy that you brought, that of course this film is about, two actors and artists pursuing their dreams, but there is a large analogy going on throughout the film that represents a lot of people who are trying to pursue their dreams. And what happens when you don't get what you want to get? What happens when you don't get when you want to get? The film answers that question, but a lot of people are having to reinvent themselves or turn the sail on their boat, so to speak. And so that point is very well taken.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so valuable because what I'm hearing is, this idea of what can happen is that when we feel that shame of something, that not getting the thing that you wanted to get, right? That feels like a failure, and then that leads to all these kind of negative feelings or mindset that keeps you stuck in one way. And hearing you talk about the connection that was experienced in the making of this film, and just the joy. I'm going to keep showing these shots because there's so much joy in there and so much connection, and to me that really is one of the antidotes, so to speak. The more you can find connection, the more you can find that joy. And like you were saying earlier, CM, finding the funny in something that in the moment certainly wasn't funny. There really is something quite cathartic about this. And I really do believe in the power of art and in this case, film, to kind of make you see something about yourself that maybe you weren't aware of, or maybe you had an inkling of it, but you weren't quite sure. And now you see somebody else. And sure, it's a fictional story, but it's on screen, it's there, and it feels real. And, it's human at the end of the day. And I can see myself in it. So I think these kinds of works are really important.
One
Wow,
thing
that's a lovely. Oh, yeah, yeah, that was just lovely. Thank you. Go ahead, Julian.
I know I'm just buzzing because so many things that I picked up on the film. One of the things I thought was so invaluable is your friend prompting you about a certain call to action. And it happens with athletes and it happens performers where they use an expression, I've left it all on the floor. And meaning they've taken all the energy they had to run that sprint or to run the marathon or to do that, well, there's nothing left. And I think that charge to say, sometimes when we don't think things are going well, we find ourselves tempered in our approach. And you had this very good call to action, is like, if you only had 60 days left, what would you do? So I think that was a good call to action. Are we doing enough? Or are we just busy complaining that it's not going our way? What else can we do?
That's so great you picked up on that. By the way, this is Denise D.B. Garner on my left, or the screen's left. I don't know how it's going to be presented. She's in the purple. And then in the orange is Carla Acosta. They play the friends of Ellie and Ben and are just kind of the wonderful comical relief in the film. Although I would say that Ben has a lot of fine moments as well. That is so true what you just said, because Ben is really this character who doesn't compromise himself. He has a very good sense of who he is. And he really is a great model for Ellie throughout the film on how to navigate her own confusion. And then through this friendship, and then also through her own journey. I don't want to give any spoilers, but she begins to find a way to flip failure. And it's a true journey of self-discovery, the movie, and about just sort of the power of friendship, but also one's own ability to navigate your own truth. And so what really stuck out when you said that is sometimes we do need to have a call to action to inspire results, not in a phony way, but in a way that feels authentic for us. So sometimes just goal setting, or what can I do today? What's one step I could do that would be one step closer to my dream? Or maybe I want to give myself a deadline. So there is a bit of a little bit of like a ticking clock in the film that kind of like inspires a lot of actions in the characters that maybe wouldn't necessarily be there if there wasn't a deadline, because this deadline suddenly kind of happens between them. And now it's like, what happens when, and in a way, it's kind of a good question to ask yourself. God, if I only had so much time to accomplish my dream, or if I only had so much time in life. I mean, as we all know, as we get older, boy, time
Mm-hmm.
is precious. Life and time is precious. If the pandemic didn't teach us that, I don't know what would. But of course, there's a lot of people that are closer to that reality in other countries. We're very lucky here in the United States. And so a lot of wonderful industrialized nations, we do have the luxury of time sometimes, and there are many countries that they live closer to the realities of what it's like to maybe lose something that or very important the next day, or fighting for your own human rights, or what have you. And certainly world events are a testament to that. So what if we only had a limited time, which in a way we do. We really don't know how much time we have. And what would I do if I knew that I only had this much time? What would I do in my life?
Mm,
It's a kind of a great question to ask yourself, because it really does kind of put your priorities right into focus.
mm. I love that, and
Mm.
it's such it's such a practical thing that one can do, because I think that when we live in the realm of visioning and dreaming, it can feel very daunting, right? Because it doesn't feel, well, it's a dream, it's a vision, so it's not quite real, right? And what you're talking about, that's really the process of making something real. What am I going to do in the next 60 days? Like, what actions will I be taking? And it's a great. I love the way we've just gone from, there's a process here that's emerging of, let's live a little bit in that mindset of the shame and the failure, and see what that's like. What are your feelings and thoughts about that? And then you're moving towards action out of that, now that you've understood what that really was about. And as you're with that understanding and that learning, you can now set yourself some goals. And I love that we're getting all of this from a conversation with you and a movie. It's not necessarily how we necessarily think about our entertainment, but there's so many nuggets in there that we can kind of take away for our own lives. And I wonder for you, CM, in terms of that process, one of the things that I know you've talked about is the importance of being focused on the present, being in the moment. Can you tell us a little bit more about that in relation to everything we've talked about in terms of the goal setting and all these things?
Absolutely. So I had a wonderful coach in Los Angeles, Julie Areola. I worked with her for a number of years, over 6 years, I think. And one of the things I learned, and she was just, I guess I really can't put into words the value of the work that she does for actors. And she's an actor herself. And so she really kind of knows how to approach the process. One thing that I learned from her profoundly is not only so many skills she taught me in life, but how to utilize a lot of the process in acting for your life, but also how to be really present to the experience you're having right in front of you. In acting, if you are anywhere else besides completely focused in on the moment, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work in film. It doesn't work in a play. It doesn't work in a one-woman show. If you are not, in a way, acting is kind of a meditation. It really forces you to be like very much like with your scene partner, the people you are working with. That certainly in the film, I executive produced the film. I wrote the film. I edited the film. I was the director of the film. Being very, very present every day to exactly what's happening. As it was a indie film, a real grassroots indie film. So many wonderful local businesses lent their locations. Being very, very present to everything right in front of you, and then being able to utilize that to move you forward. So my acting study with the wonderful acting coach I just mentioned really taught me about the power of being present and the power of process, meaning just embrace the process, because you really have to, when you're crafting another human being, you're enacting another human being, you really have to delve into that process wholeheartedly. You really have to, the process is the end. The process is the end. You can't say, okay, I really want to go for this emotional reaction in 30 seconds. Can't do it. It comes off completely phony and fake. You're on some kind of false narrative that you had in your head. And I'm talking about acting, mind you, but this can really apply in life. So this really taught me how to be a lot more present in life. And when you are just really present with people, like you both are in this beautiful podcast, I've watched other episodes, you're so present in what you're doing. I can only imagine this is exactly how you are when you're coaching, when you're, consulting. There's so much value in being truly present to the process, and that unfold. So many opportunities and events unfold with that approach that would not necessarily if you had not just completely stayed very present to what's in front of you.
You're making me think about times that really make such a difference in conversations. I'm curious, when you did this film, well, first you did the book, and then you did the film, and you're working. It changes your relationship with yourself as well as how you see the outside world. So, what else are you aiming for right now that you're looking to bring into your life and your working environments?
So the film was a really a really life-changing event, because once I had done the script, and then and by the way, we wrapped the film right before the pandemic hit. So my advice to anyone having that little voice in the back of your head saying, I want to do this. I've been wanting to do this. It's always been my dream to do this. Do it. Do it now. Whatever, when that voice in you says go, go. Because after I finished the script, and when I was writing it, it was just a completely joyful experience. It was just cathartic for me, quite frankly. I was entertaining myself. And when I finally finished, I thought, well, I'll just submit it to some contests and this and that. And I started doing it. And I had this overwhelming impulse, voice, instinct, gut, whatever you want to call it, do the film. And it was this one moment in particular that I just got this overriding sensation of, I want to do this film. I'm going to do this film. And then it was like, I looked around like, are you talking to me? What? I mean, because I had done smaller projects in LA, nothing on this scale. I had, done plays, a pilot, this and that, nothing on the scale of a feature film. But a lot of event coordination, my consulting business, and helping folks with their events. We provided arts education programs and storytelling, which dovetailed into my consulting work, being a consultant in storytelling for companies. That really helped kind of coordinate the aspects of the production schedule, the crew, and all that, because I do have a good knack for coordinating events. So a film set is just an event every day. So really my organizational skills. And then I had studied filmmaking very informally. I'm the person that's the most likely to watch the director's commentary at the end of a film. And all of those, all my experiences in LA suddenly all came together. And I suddenly felt like, I can do this. I can do this. And I didn't know where I got this like confidence, but something in me knew I was preparing for it my entire life. Something kicked into gear and suddenly was like, nope, I know what to do. And this was my first film, by the way. And the reason why I share this story is because this momentum started taking over once I started the steps, because that's what I started. I was like, because it could be very daunting. Oh, yes, I'm just going to produce and direct and be in and this and that. Right. I'm going to just produce a feature film. Yep, I'm going to do that. It's such a daunting task. And so I just started the process and I said, if doors keep opening, if this keeps flowing, for lack of a better word, I'm going to keep going. And boy, once I started on that track, this momentum behind my back, I have never experienced anything like that in my life. Because in LA, it was kind of like knocking on doors and getting some progress and then knocking on other doors. And you're just like every day, it's just you're hitting that bat trying to increase your chances. This film is dedicated to all those unknown actors. Every day, those courageous, bold dreamers that are just putting themselves out there every day. All artists are in this kind of pyramid structure of an industry, music, whether it's modeling, whether it's the theater arts, dance, so many entertainment industries, acting, of course, writing. It's a pyramid model. There's the top triangle of those that we know that are in the public sector, these artists, and all the artists trying to get up to that top triangle. There's also many artists that simply want to make a living and do what they love, but it's challenging. And so the film just puts a face on all those unknown artists, just trying to increase their chances of having the life that they wish, just do what they love. And so what was kind of remarkable to me in the whole experience of making the film is really not only being able to coalesce an amazing team, because I could not have done this without the help of, the support of my husband, without an amazing cast and crew, with the local businesses. It was this grassroots effort that was phenomenal. And to me, it's a testament to your community is sometimes your most wonderful resource. And then the press really resonated with this story of like, failure? You're talking about failure? Talk more about that. And they were kind of getting a kick out of the fact that it was. So one wonderful Harry Duke, who was on this radio show, and he said, "Well, how do you feel that your movie is about failure, but it's really a testament to successful filmmaking?" And I thought that's such an interesting way to put it, because it was like it was inspired by my failures, but it was a real kind of a story about how to succeed in filmmaking, indie filmmaking.
Wow.
Fabulous.
It's so inspiring, right? I mean, it's very, I love what you said earlier too, of just, if you've got a dream, go ahead and do it, because you never know where the next pandemic is going to hit. So, or whatever else it is, right? So yeah, I think this is just filled with a lot of inspirational ideas and some steps that people can take, which I really appreciate. So there's a question that we ask of all of our guests, and my suspicion is that it's probably related to your answer right now. But so if it's a repetition, please let us know, and we can leave it at that. But I am curious, because we do ask this of all of our guests, which is to tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today, something that you still think about today, that still influences you.
So I would say, of course, the work that I did with Julie Areola is like kind of really up there. And since I've talked about that, and of course I've talked about the process of the film, I will say that one pivotal moment happened that really showed me the power of telling your story. And that is when we first screened the film. It was the first time by the way, like I said, we wrapped right before the pandemic hit, which was just like, we didn't know a pandemic was coming, right? So I spent the pandemic editing the film. I had never edited a feature film before, so I was on this whole learning curve. So after the whole premiere was delayed because of the pandemic, of course, and once places started opening up and we started feeling like it was safe to hold an event, we had our public premiere. So cast and crew came, people in the public came, my family and friends came, my husband's family, they all came. And it was the first time anyone besides my husband, who, by the way, was a wonderful story consultant on the film. Ben is of Mexican heritage, the other lead character. There's some Spanish in the film. My husband is of Mexican heritage. And so he really helped the cultural aspects of the film and some of the language aspects. And he was just a wonderful story consultant, because he just would just say, you know what, this part doesn't work. Everything's great up to here, but boom. And then I'd be like, I love this part. I love this part. And then I'd come back to it maybe a month later and I'd take it out. I'd be like, oh my God, the film is so much better. So
I get it.
besides him, no one else had seen it. And I was just like, my heart was in my throat. Like when the opening credits came up, then we had a really nice turnout. And it was the first time I had ever put something, it is inspired by my story, but the film was so personal to me in so many ways. The mission of the film and everything, just what I wanted the film to represent. And the film is, just an hour and 54 minutes. So it was an hour and 54 minutes of just holding my husband's hand and just like, and then I'd hear like laughter, and then I'd hear more laughter. And then it was like this roller coaster ride of just like, oh my gosh, like people are getting it. And it was this insane experience of just being so nervous, but then realizing I had this great conversation with my sister, and I had said this on Live in the Bay. That was a wonderful show that had me on there. It was my first live talk show, so there's so many firsts in this film. And I said to her, and it's so true, that the host, Olivia Horton, it was like I was flying this plane for the longest time, pre-production, production, post-production, and then the film and the plane landed and they got it. And I had never ever done something kind of so personal, put it up on the screen. So there's kind of like, in a way, there's some aspects of the film that are just to the letter how it happened. And then there's some scenes that take an artistic license, and I'm kind of, only a handful of people know the difference. And so I was just floored after the film, and then just having people come up, and just the whole response was so heartwarming and so emotional, so fun, that it was just the response, I can't even describe it, because I don't know if you've ever created something very personal and then just put it out in the world, and you're just crossing your fingers that I had to do this, but I really hope someone gets something from it. And just, I think it's rare, because sometimes if you have a book or whatever, if people can read it, and you don't always know, you don't always get that direct feedback, that live feedback. So having that live feedback in the moment of my first film was just, I mean, it was so moving. And yet it was such a way where I really do believe failure, because of course the movie features funny failures throughout the film, really connects us to our humanity. So in a way, you really are just allow yourself to be really vulnerable with people, and people connect to you when you are truly vulnerable and you allow yourself to just be human, because then they can say, you know what, that happened to me too, let me tell you about it. And so it allows them to be human. It allows us to be human, right? And so to me, it was such a grand lesson in allowing yourself to be vulnerable with people, telling the truth, and just allowing yourself to connect from that place. Because of course, in acting, you are performing a role. And I think sometimes that can bleed into your life in ways that you have to remember, okay, that's acting, and now I'm me. And sometimes as an actor, you get so involved in a role, the lines can sometimes blur if you're really, getting into a kind of a more of a method type acting. And it was kind of wonderful, just like to be me, just to be me. And then like, yep, there I am. And the character learns how to embrace who she really is, her quirky uniqueness. And so to really have that experience, to me, is something I'll just always hold in my heart. And the reason I share this is because I am such a huge believer that if someone hasn't done the thing they really want to do, and I think if someone really gets quiet and they really think about it, they know what it is they really, really want to do, or they know what they love to do. And to me, it's just like, always make time in your life to do what you really love to do, even if you can't make a living at it. Every day, do that one thing you love to do. You know what it is, do it. It makes you a better person, and it adds to your life the thing that is uniquely you.
Wow. What a great What a great way to end this interview as well, right? I feel like there's not much more that needs to be said because of that great kind of inspirational call to action, right? Just go and do it. And I think throughout this whole interview, really what we've heard about failure, of course, but we've really heard about a process, and I think that's hugely valuable. And we'll be breaking that down for our listeners as well. You know, even in the show notes, just letting people know there's a process here at work. You know, don't let failure bring you down too much. Let it bring you down some, because you know that's part of the experience, it's part of the process. But then, you know, here's something that's testament to what you can do with failure. So really, really wonderful to have you, CM, on the show, and really, really appreciate you being here. Is there anything that you would want our listeners to know? We'll be sharing links to where they can find the movie and the trailer and all of these things. And I'm posting right now on our screen the poster of the movie as well. But is there anything else that you would like to communicate to our listeners?
Well, thank you sincerely for just this opportunity to have this conversation. I just have such a high regard for both of you, and just really appreciate the conversation, just and just all your intelligent approach and insights that you bring, both of you. So thank you. And just, our website is funnyfailurefilm.com. And that just has the link to the film. It has articles and resources, the link to our podcast. Artists, we invite your stories of slip ups. If you want to submit to the show, all that information is on there. So they're welcome to go there. And if they are just wanting to find some inspiration, or to share their funny failures, perhaps on our podcast, on our future show.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah. And the podcast sounds great as well. I love the idea of kind of taking it out of your personal concept of that, and then hearing all these other people talk about their slip ups, which is such a much better word, by the way, than failure. Slip ups. There we go. Anything else you want to add, Julienne? Or?
Absolutely, because I think we repurpose the word failure here. We're using it, but the message I'm getting from CM is that find things that fill you and feed your soul, and no matter what situation you're in. And that's the teachable moment I have from her.
Great. Well, we've talked a lot about inspiration, and I want to let our listeners know that if you've been inspired by this particular conversation, like I think we all have, please consider enrolling your team in one of our training programs around storytelling. We support sales, leadership development, team building. There's also a lot of coaching around personal experiences and how to turn those into wonderful stories, so that you don't leave in that place of failure or slip ups. So thanks again. And Julienne.
Yes, and thank you all. Yes, and we do coaching, so groups and private, and more things afoot in the coming year. So stay tuned and keep visiting us.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Check this out on YouTube as well. We've got the YouTube channel, the Narrative YouTube channel. All of this drives word of mouth. So if you want more people to listen and to view this show, please let everyone know and leave reviews and talk about it. So until next time, thanks so much, Julienne. Thanks, CM, for being with us.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Standing ovation.